So who do you say that Jesus is? That opens our gospel. Jesus comes before the disciples and says, so who are they saying I am? And some say, I am John the Baptist, and others say, you are a prophet or Elijah. And then Jesus turns to them and says, but you, and you, who do you say that Jesus is? Think about that a moment. How do you answer that question? By what sources? Is it based on the actions you know of Jesus? That he ate with tax collectors and prostitutes? That he healed people on the Sabbath against the law? Is this the Jesus that you recall the minute I asked that question? Maybe what you think of is kindness and compassion. What else might you think of? Do you remember any physical characteristics? What do we know? The historical Jesus, we know generalities. We may not know specifics. But we know that the historical Jesus that walked this earth was a man who lived in first century Palestine, was a man, therefore, that odds are had dark skin, a man we would name a black man today. Is that the image that comes to mind? I wonder. Now, his disciples, when he was asking these questions, he was asking them not because he wanted them to say, oh, you're a really great guy, and I really love your cooking. That was not what he was asking. The titles they were giving, it was because the gospel itself was written 30 years or so after he died. And the disciples had a scandal in front of them. The Jesus whom they followed, the Jesus whom they proclaimed the Son of God, the Messiah, the Anointed One, was the same Jesus who, by Roman edict and filled out in Israel, was a criminal and was crucified on the cross. This was the most degrading, dehuman thing that could happen. You were marginal to the outest darkness if you were a criminal and crucified. So to stand up in front of your peers and to say that you believed in Jesus Christ as Son of God and your Savior and who you followed was to say that I follow a criminal. I follow a criminal that was crucified. That was hard for them to swallow. That was hard for them to wrap their brains around. But yet, that is precisely the faith we proclaim. So what happens when we come to today? When we answer that question? Who is Jesus? What are our scandals? What is it about Jesus that we have a hard time grabbing onto and recognizing? Now, we have depicted Jesus in art through most of Western civilization. We have depicted Jesus as a white man over and over and over again. And we hang on to that, I would suggest, as an idol. It's not because we don't know that though those artists had good intentions, because they clung on to the fact that Jesus Christ, the living Christ, is in all of us. And all of us have a bit of Jesus, and we are connected to Jesus. So they drew and painted and sculpted Jesus in images just like they were. They claimed Jesus for themselves, and that's a good thing. But we did it over and over and over again to the point that our imagination equated Jesus as a white man. Back in the late 70s, an artist by the name of Edwina Sandys, British artist, sculpted a 4-foot statue in bronze. The statue was a female figure in the shape of a cruciform. On Maundy Thursday in 1984, St. John the Divines took that statue and placed it in their ambulatory, which is, if you know cathedrals, they have a sacristy and a high altar, and they have a way around that on the outside, and it was placed on the outside. And come Easter Vigil, the Bishop Suffragan of New York, Walter Dennis, stood up and denounced the statue. He said of the statue that it was desecrating our symbols. Think about that a moment. Depicting a woman suffering, depicting a woman crucified, depicting a woman connected to Christ was desecrating our symbols. Now, we were just a few years past the fight that gained women's ordination in the Episcopal Church. In society, we were 2 years past the utter failure of the Equal Rights Amendment to pass and be ratified. We were then, as are now, in a society where women are not equal to men. And the idea that this representation would make that connection is no less ahistorical than painting Jesus as a white man. But yet, it stirred controversy. Letters, newspapers, articles. What else might stir controversy? If I showed you depictions of a Latino Christ, if I showed you Christ in the image of a Chinese woman or a Filipino man or a drag queen, if I showed you a picture of Christ in any of these ways, in any way you can imagine of another human being on this earth, would you be scandalized? That is also our faith. We say that all humanity is in the image and likeness of God. We know from St. Paul that by the very baptism that there are no Jew or Greek, that there is no master or slave, nor male and female. That is the faith we proclaim. That is the faith we say is ours. So I ask again, who do you say that Jesus is? What would it be like to kneel in prayer to the Jesus who is from Guam or Fiji or China or Russia? What would it be to kneel in prayer to the God that does not look like you, that does not love like you? What would it be to have the God and Jesus represented in a wheelchair? All of these are possibilities of how we can answer and should answer, who do you say that I am? And it is important, like it was for the Krista and women's rights and others, because if we can't imagine Jesus connected to that image, then how is it that we actually treat people who are that image? How would our lives and society change if every time you saw another human being, you knew that they walked in the image of God? How would it be when you woke up that morning and you said your morning prayers in front of that image? That is the scandal and the challenge of our day and our time. When we say all are welcome on our signs, that is the challenge of that welcome. To make it specific and concrete to all the various people we meet in our society. That is our faith. And it is also our hope. Because it means that every single one of us lives and breathes in and through Jesus Christ. That is our hope. Scandal and hope are the same thing. Cross and resurrection. You cannot have one without the other. And so, today, we live in that challenge, and we live in that hope. So I ask, who do you say that Jesus is?